Our bodies are constantly communicating with us, and it's only when we bring the subconscious and the conscious mind to meet and into close relationship that we can clearly hear and correctly interpret what the body is trying to tell us. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today I wanted to talk about conditioning and the subconscious and the body. So first, just a quick lay of the land, what we're talking about when we're talking about the subconscious. First of all, our autonomic nervous system, breathing, heart rate, digestion, all of those functions that are coordinated that are not voluntary functions, they're involuntary. We don't have to think about breathing, we don't have to make ourselves digest food. Those activities are coordinated by our subconscious. It also stores memories, whether positive or negative, traumatic, joyous. It contains all of that. We're not consciously aware of all that, but it's down there. We have habits and opinions and beliefs and things that are stored in our subconscious, and then that's where our emotional responses and our gut instincts come from. We call it the subconscious mind, but you can see that all of this has to do with the body. All of this is based physiologically, right? And certainly the energy body as well. And then in contrast to that, we have our conscious mind, which is more of what we think of when we think of the mind. In human design, the mind center, but also just popularly, the mind, our conscious thoughts, we all sort of know what that is. When we talk about mind-body integration, we really are talking about integrating the conscious mind, what we have conscious access to, with regards to thoughts and that internal dialogue, what we're aware of consciously, and then the subconscious mind, which is all that I just described. And the mind-body split, it refers to us being a little bit severed from ourselves, living up in that virtual reality. This is stuff I've been kind of talking about in previous episodes. So in mind-body integration, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bridge our conscious mind with our subconscious mind and have good fluidity and communication and a syncing up of the function of those two. We don't want to live up in our head in these fantasy and maybe fear-based realities that don't actually have to be tethered to reality, because the mind can think and conceive of stuff that is so far out of the scope of reality. And then we also don't want to be a slave to our instincts or our emotional states either. We want to have access to both parts of ourselves to facilitate and coordinate and share information between the two, so we have more access to our full selves. And that's really what deconditioning is all about. It's our so-called higher faculties having a connection with our instinctual self, so we are a fuller expression of what we are. We're able to check in with our gut. We are able to balance an emotional or gut reaction with a wider perspective or more of a bird's eye view. We can meet an involuntary reaction such as anxiety with tapping or shaking or deep breathing in order to help facilitate and to just process through that physiological response. We're not cut off from ourselves, we are not disconnected, we're working together and we're working in sync. Our bodies are constantly communicating with us, and it's only when we bring the subconscious and the conscious mind to meet and into close relationship that we can clearly hear and correctly interpret what the body is trying to tell us. Heightened emotional states, clammy hands, possibly a fever, sweating, these are all ways that the body communicates with us. Because we're so conditioned, though, to really heavily privilege what's going on in our conscious mind, we often ignore or can't really hear the messages coming from our bodies that are trying to signal us that something's going on. And usually it's only until we develop some moderate or even severe condition that we start to clue in that something's going on in our body and start to listen and actually respond to our body now that it's shouting at us, now that it's, making a big clamor to get our attention. Because all of those more subtle warnings weren't heeded. We maybe couldn't hear them, or if we did, we maybe shoved them under the rug because it wasn't convenient at the time. We all do this. This is how conditioning works. In a previous episode, I had pointed out that our authority actually resides in the body, but it's kind of an oversimplification, and I wanted to apologize because reflectors and mental projectors, you have an outer authority, it's not an inner authority, but with a reflector, the moon cycle, and with a mental projector, your environment and surroundings, you do relate to that outer authority through your bodily responses. So I just wanted to clarify that because it wasn't technically correct, but at the same time it still holds that we hear and feel and get those messages from our authority, be it outer or inner, through the body. The sense of it operates through the unconscious, and certainly not through the conscious mind, certainly not through the not-self mind. If you've ever heard the term homeostasis, it refers to all those micro adjustments that our body does unconsciously in order to bring us into balance with our environment. So a really basic example is it's hot outside, we sweat, that helps to cool down the body's temperature in response to increased temperature outside. There are all these little micro biochemical processes that happen throughout our day to keep us centered and balanced physiologically. And when I think about in human design, our strategy and authority, that is a mechanism for homeostasis as well, but I think it's a bigger picture homeostasis. And getting really solid on our strategy and authority, we can make micro adjustments so that life doesn't have to really shake us to get our attention. Just like if we are failing to have homeostasis in our body, it accumulates to a point where you're going to have a health crisis. Well, with our strategy and authority, if we're not making smaller adjustments to stay centered in our being, then at a certain point we stray so far from our true selves that life has to intervene, and it's going to be more dramatic to almost whiplash us and overcorrect us back to ourselves. You know, if we're a generator and we are really driving and pushing ourselves towards a goal that doesn't light us up, if we're a manifester and we're disrespecting our rest cycle and trying to push past that and override it, if we're a projector or reflector trying to work in this world like an energy type does, all of these things are taking us off balance, and the more and more we operate outside of ourselves, outside of our type and how we are supposed to be operating, the more we're inviting calamity and chaos and injury and situations that are going to slow us down and take us back to square one in a sense so that we can course correct. I mentioned in the previous episode that my human design motivation is guilt, and I have done this a lot. I will be, in my transference hope, being negligent of certain situations, just crossing my fingers and hoping it will resolve on its own, and then life has to do the correction and the adjustment for me and force me to be in my proper motivation and getting stuff taken care of. If the name of my podcast wasn't clear, I am a splenic authority, and with a defined spleen, boy, we get into trouble with this because we have this consistent feeling of health. We have pretty good immune systems in general, and we can act and treat our bodies in an unhealthy way for a long time before it finally catches up to us. But it does catch up to us. We kind of become experts at ignoring our body, or at least taking that health for granted and acting like there's nothing that's gonna knock us down. We tend to be really resilient, and I, for one, definitely take advantage of that. I rarely ever get sick. If I do, it's usually not enough to knock me down, and even when my body is really trying to force me to rest, I can just so easily push past that and keep working and just kind of deny that I'm sick and keep going. It can be tough because you can become quite negligent and let things build up to the point of crisis. I also mentioned about that 2551 activated in my body graph and the 25 being initiation through shock. So given all of this, it's no surprise that I have encountered health crises in my life. It took prolonged physiological misery for me to finally truly honor my subconscious and its homeostasis and discover actually a surprising connection between my inner child and all of this, which I will get to in a bit. So there was a point in my 20s for almost 3 straight years where I had, and trigger warning, this is body stuff, this is female body stuff, and so if you're squeamish about the body, this may not be a great podcast for you, although If you're willing or wanting to shift that, then stay tuned, right? But I had what was like a yeast infection, but it wasn't. And it was yeast infection-like symptoms, but much, much worse, regularly for almost 3 straight years. I never went any much more than a month without symptoms, and they would last for at least a week or 2 every time. And I tried monostat, boric acids, apple cider vinegar flushes, garlic suppository, poultices, organic cotton underwear, elimination diets. I mean, you name it, I was desperate, and I tried everything, and none of it worked. I mean, a lot of it actually just made it worse. And similar to the life trauma that I experienced last year that I talked about in my previous episode, it got to the point where I had no other choice but to just surrender. I just had to kind of give up and resign to my fate. And really looking back on this experience, I can clearly see how all that firepower that I was throwing at my anatomy in order to try to fix the issue was just amplifying and prolonging my suffering. And if you've listened to my previous episodes, you can probably gather that in general I have a healthy mistrust of establishments, and the medical establishment is absolutely no exception. I need to be basically bleeding out or have broken a major bone to get me to go to the hospital. But during this time, I was miserable enough that I actually went and saw a doctor, and sure enough, they had no idea what was going on with me, they had no solution for me, and they didn't even have a single suggestion of what I could try. My instincts now, I'm sure it had to do something with hormones and pH balance, but in a much more real sense, what I needed was a spiritual and energetic solution. So I mentioned that everything that I was trying was just kind of making it worse, right? But you can see in my actions and my stance that I was completely at war with myself, making what was happening in my body my enemy. I was basically bombing my anatomy to try to wipe out this invasion. Looking at what I've outlined in terms of homeostasis and how the body, through our subconscious, communicates with us, I was trying to shoot the messenger. That is my own self. It was only until I completely gave up that I actually started to heal. And it became like a mantra, like, yes, welcome to my day of these symptoms. You are welcome here. I invite you in. I fully embrace you. Have a cup of tea. This is just what my reality is. You can stay as long as you need to, and I am, whenever you're ready, open and willing to hear what you are trying to tell me, but not from a place where I need you to leave. And some days I would lay in bed or on the couch completely immobilized with my feet up in the air, just crying and trying to breathe through it. And it was proven to me that no topical solution that I was going to try to apply to my anatomy down there was going to make this situation go away. But what I discovered is that I couldn't get rid of the problem, but I could help to maintain it and could try to make myself comfortable as this worked through me. So a little bit of diluted acidic solution, lavender essential oil, aloe vera, warm compresses, things to give me some temporary relief because I was worth it and I deserved to feel okay sometimes. So it was a huge shift. I went from being at war with myself, making myself a problem that needed to be fixed or actually eradicated, to a mama who is seeing her baby suffering and is there with consistent nurturing, trying to just hold them and do things to bring them comfort and try to bring some ease to a painful situation. That's a totally different energetic stance towards myself. It was really only until I started to come to terms with this might be forever for me. I might struggle with this for the rest of my life, and in embracing that and saying that's okay, I still love myself and I still want to be here, things really did start to shift for me. Right before that though, I was really stuck on this idea that the solution would be my partner and they needed to be more compassionate and more supportive, but they were. It's just that I wasn't being compassionate and supportive towards myself. So as with anything, no matter how much of what we want or need that we're getting from the outside, unless we're willing to give it to ourselves, it's not really going to stick and we're not really going to feel it. Because my partner at the time was really in the same boat that I was. We were both helpless. And I came to understand eventually that all of this was my inner child who was incredibly traumatized and helpless needed me and needed to feel that from me. It needed me to stick with it through the helplessness and not abandon it like I had always done because I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know any better. That was it. It needed me not to self-abandon even though I didn't know how to fix things or where to go. So our inner child is a critical core component of our subconscious mind. Our inner child holds and was shaped by our deepest memories. Beliefs, behaviors, traumas, preferences are all formed initially in that inner child part of ourselves. Over these few initial episodes, I've been building a picture of how conditioning and deconditioning operates through our bodies, specifically the subconscious. And I hope I'm sort of drawing this connection between a healthy relationship with our inner child, a healthy relationship with our bodies, a healthy relationship between mind and body, and a strong, solid foundation for deconditioning. So the program demonizes our bodies, it demonizes our inner children, it makes our bodies and the symptoms and what our inner child is trying to communicate to us through those symptoms a problem, and we need to go seek an outside authority to make that problem go away. We have a whole health industry that is built around chasing after these symptoms, but once you tackle one, like the many-headed hydra from Greek myth, a handful more sprout up in its place. If we see those symptoms for what they are, as cries from our inner child that needs attunement, that needs attention, that needs us to slow down and get quiet and offer a listening ear to it, then we're treating our symptoms at the source. But it's not just about listening. It's not just about attuning, okay? We have been conditioned our entire lives to self-abandon, so there is a large gap of trust with us and our inner child that needs repair. So it's not just about listening to the body, but it's about following through and making changes, showing a consistency of action to repair that relationship with your inner child. It is the same as following your strategy and authority. We need all parts of ourselves online, on board, loving and trusting us in order to be our true self. We can see that the needs of our inner child directly conflicts with the needs of the program or the generated world that wants us to be constantly productive. Any needs, care, rest, any of that is not supposed to exist. We should be productive at all times, and if we show any signs of slowing down or any indication that we might have needs, then we're just going to be replaced with someone who is willing to override themselves 24/7 in order to stay with the program. And we all know how disposable we are to this program, but we're so resistant to making changes. It's really hard to go against our conditioning. But we have to start to work unwaveringly, consistently to repair that relationship and to establish trust. Establishing trust with our inner child, because that is the core of our subconscious and because the subconscious is so physiological, repairing our relationship with our inner child is so akin to repairing this mind-body split, and that is fundamental to deconditioning. It's all related. It's really about becoming an unconditionally loving parent towards your own inner child that our own real biological parents or guardians or whoever raised us could never be. We need to make ourselves a priority and show the utmost care and concern for our needs. No matter if they sound silly, if it's inconvenient, seems like a waste of time, it's not. When we look at the actions of the not self, avoiding the truth, hiding and suppressing parts of ourselves, people-pleasing, being perfectionistic and self-critical, not standing up for ourselves or what we believe in, all of these cause further damage to that already traumatized little inner child. And because we're not really aware of this part of ourselves that's trying to get our attention through these physical symptoms, but also mental and spiritual afflictions, and I believe those are all intimately connected anyways, we make this innocent and badly wounded part of ourselves sort of the scapegoat and try to resolve what's going on with us by trying to eradicate it, cover it up, smother it, and silence it within ourselves. We will throw poison pharmaceuticals on top of surgeries, add a wallop of painkillers and numbing agents to try to get this part of us to just shut up for good. Ouch. So I know we've probably all heard our thoughts create our realities, and then we as adults, we hear this and let's try some affirmations. But it's easy to see when we think about trying to decondition ourselves and change our mindset and create positive visions for ourselves. If we have an inner child running our subconscious, at the core of our subconscious, that hates us, distrusts us, is so disappointed, has been abandoned by us our entire lives, don't you think it's going to be in conflict? And so when your subconscious is hearing those positive affirmations and thinking, yeah, that's full of it's not going to work. So we have to get our inner child on board if we're going to decondition and make positive changes. So I want to share a story from massage school. My case studies partner, and case studies is you work intensively with one person throughout the course of your schooling to address their specific issues and injuries. I was working with this person one day and I was doing a myofascial stroke, which is really long and slow and methodical, and I had met a brick wall of resistance, and I literally heard a voice in my mind, and it was so sassy, and it said, yeah, you're gonna just abandon us anyways. To me, it took me aback. I heard it and I was like, whoa, and my immediate response was to resume my presence and say, I'm not gonna abandon you. I will hold and I will stay here day after day after day, case study class after case study class, and I will hold you and I will be there for you and I will be present, and you never need to change, you never need to let me in, but just so you know, I'm not going away either, and so if you would like to work with me, I'm here. And after testing me a little bit more, the tissue started to let me move, and I was amazed, and I actually talked to my partner after this, my case studies partner, and they confirmed that that's exactly how they felt it as well. This attitude in there, and could feel my consistency and my presence and this just sort of adult. Again, I've been talking about that inner parent, that unconditionally loving adult presence that the inner child wants to trust but isn't always sure if it can. And this is part of what I'm talking about. This is the energy that we need to bring. When we have problems that arise, symptoms that come up, health concerns, think in terms of this is my inner child trying to speak with me, trying to get through to me about something that probably has nothing to do necessarily with a body part, but it wants to have a relationship with me. It's probably not going to trust me very much at first, but I need to be the adult in the situation. Just say, hey, you can throw your tantrum, you can cause me to be out of work for a year. I will do whatever it takes. It's that level of commitment that we need to have with ourselves because of how badly this part of ourself is damaged, how little it understands about what's going on. It's really just tragic. It is hard work. I've talked in other episodes about definitely have support systems in place. You know, a therapist is a really good idea if you're going to be doing this kind of work, but it is so fundamental to deconditioning, getting a relationship going with that, because that is going to be the bridge to your subconscious. Ever since that class where this all happened, I've actually felt that over and over and over again from people's bodies, and I don't really talk to them about it, but it's there. It would be a while until I made the connection to the inner child and that voice, but I have people's tissues, I know it sounds weird, but I have people's tissues communicating to me all the time from a very childlike place that is testing me and responds to my consistent, warm, attuned energy that it wants to trust, but it's not sure if it can, and so it will kind of have this back and forth with me, and as I consistently show it presence, then it starts to soften. It's miraculous. And I see every human being now from that lens that, oh, we all have that inner child. We never know what that person has been through, what kind of damage was done to that inner child, and seeing people through that lens, at the core of them is this child. My compassion for humanity has grown so much, and my patience with the unconscious and the ignorance that we do see in humanity has grown exponentially. And I really want to address here, in case anybody is feeling any shame right now because you don't like kids, you don't get kids, you don't want to be around kids, you don't feel compassion for kids. That is so normal. I used to be a lot like that, actually. I didn't really get it. I'm the youngest in my generation, and it would be a while until my sisters had children. I don't have any children, and I'm not going to. So for a while there, I never babysat, right? I just didn't really have much of an interest in kids, and I know there's a lot of people out there who just really dislike kids. I've known people that way. There is nothing wrong with that. I will say, of course, I cannot know, and you do not have to accept this, take it with a grain of salt. That could be an indication, and it was for me, that I needed a lot of work on my inner child. I know this sounds crazy and we're gonna judge ourselves for this. Please don't judge yourself for this. It's totally understandable if you have a really wounded inner child to almost resent children, because it's like, hey, I was never shown that. Who's this kid? We know that one day they grow up to be adults, and adults can kind of be a-holes, so I get it. It's okay if you don't like kids, but I will say that it may be an indication that this work for you with your inner child is going to be really, really important, and that might shift. So I went from kind of not really having any connection with kids, not really getting the whole deal, not actively disliking them, maybe finding them to be a little bit annoying, to becoming a PE teacher for elementary school kids, and I loved it. Kids are so wise, they're so fun and fabulous. I just absolutely adore kids now, and my nephews and niece, I love them to death. They bring me such joy. As my relationship with my inner child has gotten so much better, then my ability to relate to children has just blossomed. Whew! Okay, that was a lot. I want to make a part 2 to this video that will focus on practical ways to do this inner child work and bridge that mind-body split. So I want to thank my massage school friend that I mentioned today, because not only that situation, but our conversations over the years have really helped me to clarify and realize some of this inner child stuff. So bye for now, and until we meet again, I am just wishing you all the love and strength on your journey of deconditioning.